Hey family, we have reached the end of the road with the Gilded Age. Well, at least for this season. And I have to say that as upset and disappointed as I am that I will not be able to watch this show every Monday night, I have to say this was probably the best episode of the season. And it makes sense though, because it was the season finale. They tied up a lot of loose ends. They brought some things to conclusion. We see where new chapters are going to begin for some of the characters. And they also introduced a couple of little nuggets, some new things that we didn't even know about. Um, Extremely good episode. I watched it twice, as I usually do. Number one, to make sure that I'm able to give a good review. And number two, just because it was good and I wanted to make sure that I did not miss anything. So let's just jump right into it. There were three major storylines that they touched on, and there was a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to start with the big things, and then I'll just throw in the other little storylines as we move along. So
Mrs. Astor, how good of you to come.
How kind you are to receive me, Mrs. Russell.
My baby is alive, Mama. My baby is alive, and I want him back.
I assume we're not getting married today?
I don't admire myself for it.
the first was Marian and Tom Rhaikes. This was something that we've been debating all season. Is he legit? Is he really into her? Was he trying to steal her money? Was he using her as a stepladder to move through New York society? Although it seemed like he didn't need her because he was just popping up everywhere. Is Aunt Agnes right about him? Is he an adventurer? So we got the answers to this question last night. So we see that they have decided to elope. They make a meeting. They decide to meet on Friday at Grand Central, and they're going to go off and get married. You know, she's got her bag packed and everything. She tells Peggy about it. Miss Chamberlain is in on it because they're going to, she's going to help them with this whole thing. Aunt Ada discovers that something is awry. You know, she sees Peggy with Marian's bag, and Peggy doesn't see, because Peggy has so much virtue. She will not lie to her directly, but she also will not betray Marian. So she says enough so that Ada is able to to put the pieces together and to realize that Marian has something up her sleeve. So they have a good conversation. And that was probably, I mean, people have been telling Marian since the beginning, since Mr. Rhaikes has been showing up a lot, that she needs to watch him, right? But she's been pushing him off, and again, they've just been like, all right, you know, if you think so, but they all have a feeling about him. Ada, who's probably the most supportive of Marian's endeavors, this time she pulls her niece aside and she tells him, like, you know, if you really want this marriage, push for it. You know, fight with Aunt Agnes if you need to, but don't just do it this way. It's not going to bode well for you. But of course, Marian doesn't want to hear that. Even Miss Chamberlain, who has allowed them to meet at her house in private, gives her a little bit of a hint of, you know, I don't know if this is, you think that he's ready to give up the New York society life, and I don't see that happening. But again, Marian dismisses her. Aurora had spoke to her last week and said, you know, I'm worried about you and Mr. Fane because she's seen him out and about. So all three of these women have let her know how they feel and what they think about this man, and she pushes them all to the side. And in this episode, we see three instances in which they all speak to her prior to them going off to get married.
New York and see how the land lies. After all, there's no law that says we have to stay here.
I do not believe Mr. Rhaikes will give up New York so easily.
You're wrong. Society means as little to him as it does to me.
I can't help blaming Mr. Rhaikes.
We both wanted to wait until we had Aunt Agnes's blessing.
But he hasn't waited. Has he, dear? Well, he was more than talking to Miss Bingham. At one point, he leaned over and whispered in her ear. Well, she was transported. And every minute after that, she clung to his arm.
And even with all of the compounding evidence, Marian does not want to believe it until the writing is really on the wall. She's at Miss Chamberlain's house waiting for him, and it's hours have passed and he has not shown up. At this point, Aurora has already gone to the house and she has spoken to Ada and told Ada what she saw, that she met at the academy with Miss Bingham, who is the niece of a very wealthy man in New York City. And she said they were like canoodling, and they were whispering to each other, and she could tell that Miss Bingham was smitten by him. So she goes and she tells Ada. Ada, already knowing that something is going on and that Marian might be going away to elope with this man, tells her to go to Miss Chamberlain's house and let Marian know ASAP, which she does. She gets there and it's Marian, Miss Chamberlain, obviously because it's her home, Peggy because she agreed to see Marian off, and Aurora comes. And at this point, there's red flags all over the place. He's not there, he's late, and now Aurora's coming with this latest news. And even with that news, and even with the fact that he is not where he's supposed to be at that time, Marian still is in denial. So they tell her, go to his office and talk to him. So she goes to his office, and he's there. And my first thought was, my man was sitting at the desk with his head down writing as if it's a regular day at work for him. Meanwhile, he has this woman sitting waiting for him and thinking that she is going to go off and get married and disrupt her whole life and disrupt and upset her family. But he says he was trying to write a letter. I don't know, right? So she confronts him, and he pretty much lets her know that he thought about it and he doesn't think that they will have any kind of life in New York City if they're penniless. And he anticipates that they will be ostracized. Obviously, Aunt Agnes will probably, I don't know that Aunt Agnes would disown her, but Aunt Agnes was really never planning to leave her any money anyway, but they know they won't have Aunt Agnes's support. Ada will support her, but Ada has no money. He obviously has no money, so he's just looking at this like, look, where are we going to go with this, right?
We know New York now, you and I. There's a life to be lived here, and a good life. But two penniless strangers from out of town could not have hoped to live it. Can we at least part as friends?
But instead of being man enough to tell her this, and tell her face to face, A, we don't know if he was even going to write that letter. And B, you should not be writing her a letter. You didn't convince her to elope with you. You didn't pursue her via letter, right? You were in her face. You was showing up all the time. You was kissing her in dark corners and all types of stuff. But now when it's time to break it off, you want to resort to writing a letter. And you weren't even man enough to contact, there's just so many things wrong with this picture, which makes us believe that he is the F-boy that Aunt Agnes has said he was from day one. But yeah, so he doesn't, he tells her, without money, where are we going to go with this? And, everything that all these women have been saying is true. Miss Chamberlain said he's not going to give up New York. Ada said if he really loves you, he would wait. Aurora was right about him canoodling with somebody else, and that he was trying to find somebody who had wealth. So it all came out to be true. He tells her that he still loves her and was real and all this other stuff, but clearly it's bullshit. And then he has the nerve to ask her if they can part as friends. And this is where my issue with Marian, again, I was kind of upset with her throughout the whole season because I thought she was being naive. But I was giving her a pass because perhaps she is naive. She's a young girl from Pennsylvania, maybe sheltered, did not have a lot of life experience. She fell in love with somebody and she went for it. Like, we've all done that, right? So I give her a pass for that. But this man has disrespected you. He's embarrassed you. He's turned her world upside down. And didn't even have the decency to talk to her face to face about it. And still, she's still giving him some grace. He says, can we part as friends? And she says something to the effect of, I don't want to be enemies. And then even later at Miss Russell's, at Bertha's ball, this dude has the audacity to show up with Miss Bingham. Then talking about, oh, I didn't know you were going to be here. It doesn't matter if she was going to be there or not. She was going to find out that you were there with Miss Bingham. The same woman who, listen, I don't understand how a week ago you were gung-ho and now you in a whole different place, which means to me that you never were intent on this. I don't know what happened in between him saying, let's go elope, to I'm just going to write this chick a letter. And I'm thinking maybe he had kind of put his feelers out with Miss Bingham and wasn't sure if she was receptive. And sometime in between those couple of days, or however long it was between that conversation they had in the park until that Friday, maybe Miss Bingham gave him the green light and he said, you know what, I want to go in this direction because A, she has money, and B, she's down for this. And I'm just going to toss Marian to the wayside. But dude, like, whatever. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on him because many of us were questioning his intentions and were wondering if he was truly who he said he was. And now we know that he's not. Marian takes it with grace. But what this does do is opens the door for her and Larry. I had said last week, I got a feeling that her and Larry were starting something. And the good thing about what they're starting is that it's genuinely starting as a friendship. He seems to genuinely like her. She seems to genuinely like him. They have this camaraderie between the two of them, and I think it's going to grow into something romantic. We saw them dancing together at the ball, and he walked her back to her house across the street afterwards. So, there's potential that, Marian is going to, she might have a relationship with Larry Russell, and he's a good guy. He comes from money. Agnes is still not going to approve because he's a Russell. But given everything that happened in this last episode, maybe Agnes will be more open-minded to it down the road. I mean, and when I say down the road, I mean like season 3 or season 4, not next season. Agnes is not going to evolve that quickly. But yeah, so that was the situation with Marian. And now, so we know that Tom Rhaikes is not the good guy that she thought he was. And we can just kind of write him off, and now Marian can move on to Larry or to whomever, just like Ada told her, you are young, you are beautiful, you are in the society, you will meet somebody else and you will find your way, which she will. So let's put a pin on that story and let's move to the next one.
And we are to assume this boy is my son.
All right, so let's talk about Peggy. We knew all season that there was something in her past that we didn't know about. We know that she was on the outs with her father. Come to find out last week that she had been married to a man that her father did not think was good enough for her. She had a baby. They had moved to Philadelphia. They had moved to Pennsylvania. They had a baby. Her father came and got her. She thought the baby had died in childbirth, but she wasn't sure, which is the reason she had hired Tom Rhaikes to do some investigation, because she was looking for the midwife to find out what actually happened to her baby. The marriage was dissolved because her father strong-armed her husband into saying that he had been married before, so that the marriage was null and void. That's the reason that she ended up leaving the Van Rhijn's house, because old busybody Armstrong read her letter and was going to tell Agnes. She didn't have to leave, but she left anyway, right? So now we realize, so her mom is talking to the maid. The maid is finds a paper, finds an envelope. The maid finds a piece of mail in Peggy's father's pants, gives it to the wife, thinking it's nothing. Come to find out, it's a letter from the family who adopted Peggy's son. So yes, her son is still alive, and the father was part of this scheme to scoot him away, take him away from Peggy and give him to another family, but he has been keeping tabs on them, hence the letter. The mother sees the letter, she reads it, she realizes what her husband has done, and she tells Peggy, and Peggy is distraught. And it's bittersweet because on one hand, she learns that her son is alive. But on the other hand, the child is now adopted by another family. I'm not sure how long it's been. I don't know why the number 3 stands out in my mind, as if I'm thinking the boy is like 3 years old. I don't know. I could be making that number up. But the point is that the child has been adopted by another family. So now this puts Peggy in a precarious situation, because obviously she wants to know her son. Bigger than she wants to know her son, she wants her son back. But he is now living with another family. So they confront the father when he comes back from a business trip in Chicago, and he tells them, listen, I did this for y'all. I worked too hard to have your lives just drugged down because of scandal. I did what I did, and I don't feel bad about it. I'm not going to help you find him. And, it is what it is. So, but fortunately, Peggy's mom is on her side. She is siding with her daughter on this, and we see now that the two of them are packing to get on a train to go to Pennsylvania to find this person, to find the family who adopted this son, and try to figure out how they could get him back. So I'm imagining that that's going to be the crux of Peggy's storyline for season 2.
And you won't find him. Leave him alone. He's happy now and settled. I made sure of that.
You know, and this really was conflicting for me because I absolutely understand Peggy's anguish and anger. That's your baby. You know, her father made decisions that changed the trajectory of her life, as was the time. Fathers often did that. And we see mothers often do that because that's what Bertha is doing with her daughter. However, Peggy's an adult, and it's a terrible thing to not be able to make your own choices in life and to be lied to and to be manipulated, especially by somebody who you love and who you know loves you. I can't imagine being ripped apart from my own child. So I can't even wrap my mind around what Peggy is going through. I mean, to think your child died, then to not know if your child died, and then to just be in this constant state of limbo where you don't know what happened. And now she has some clarity. She knows her child's alive. She's got to find him, which I don't know that it's going to be. It could be incredibly difficult. It could not be. You know, it all depends on who they get in contact with once they get into Pennsylvania. Now, if I was the mother while the father was in Chicago, I'd have been upstairs rummaging through all of his papers, everything to find out, because I mean, he's still getting letters from them. That means there's other documents upstairs in his office or whatever. But yeah, so I would definitely, before he knew that I knew, I would be all up in his stuff, so I would get as much leverage as I can prior to him showing up, because I knew that there was a strong possibility that he wasn't going to willingly help me. But that aside, this is tragic. On the flip side, Mr. Scott, a former slave who pulled himself up from his bootstraps, became a professional, became part of the Black elite to create this life for his family.
Because I freed our daughter and our grandson from a life of shame, everything I've done was done for Peggy and the boy.
I want to be free of my own child.
You know, he knows a life. Now, don't get me wrong. The 1880s was not good for Black folks. Shoot, 2022 ain't great for Black folks either. But living in slavery, I mean, that's a whole different level of oppression and racism. And I can only imagine what her father went through in his lifetime and what he knows that his parents went through in their lifetime. So I get that he wants to create the best possible situation for his daughter and doesn't want anything that he thinks is going to hold her back or limit her potential. The intention, I get behind the intention of it. The intention is baked in love and wanting better for your kid, but definitely there's nothing right about this. You know, especially for a man who has of means, a Black man of means in that time. You know, it's not like she went and got pregnant, didn't know who the father was, or the father was a terrible person or whatever. I mean, we don't know much about her husband, but based on Peggy, I would imagine she would have chosen a man of quality. He may not have had money and position, he may not have been educated, but I have to believe he was a man of quality, because otherwise Peggy would not have been attracted to him. So let her marry this man and let her have her family. And because he's in a position to help if he needs to, then you help them financially or however else you can. But this was just too much. Like you just manipulated the entire situation, and now you have created a situation where there's all these people who are distraught. You know, the Peggy doesn't know her son doesn't know his mother. The family who adopted the child is going to be in a precarious situation, because when she comes back wanting her kid, that's going to be a whole messy situation. The child, who's probably too young to realize what's going on, but he's going to grow up to realize that he is feeling pulled in so many different directions. I mean, this decision has impacted so many lives, and it didn't have to. You could have stood by your daughter's decision and then done what you could, what was within your means, to make her life as comfortable as possible. You know, help her husband go to school if that's what you needed. you know, help him become a professional so that he can follow in your footsteps if that's so important to you, so that Peggy could live the life that, you know, you've created for her. You know, and I'm imagining Peggy's the only child because she hasn't mentioned any siblings, but everything you have was going to go to her anyway. So, you know, this was just I get his intention, wanting best for his child, but, you know, he went about this all the wrong way, and it's just going to have terrible ramifications for everybody who's involved. But I'm happy that Peggy has received some kind of closure in knowing that her son lived, knowing he's alive, knowing that he's being treated well, and we'll see in season 2 what happens with all of this. Now, it would not be the Gilded Age if we did not have a little dose of humor. Monsieur Baudin. This little storyline gave me life. So come to find out that the Russell chef is really not a French chef, which obviously was of the utmost importance to Bertha because, you know, she's a true snob. He confesses to Mr. Russell that he is not French, that he is actually a farm boy from Kansas. He was a merchant seaman who was then a dishwasher and a cook in France, where he learned how to cook in a French way and where he adopted his French accent. And when he came back to the States, he realized that, like Mrs. Russell, there's a bunch of snobs and nobody wanted a chef from the Midwest. So he decided to work what he had, and he obviously had the skill set. He was a great cook. He knew how to cook in the French style, knew French cuisine. And obviously he was able to adopt a really good French accent, which he did. And he used that to bamboozle the Russells into hiring him and thinking that he was a French chef. So of course, Bertha is beside herself because for her, everything is image. You know, her husband says the food is good. What difference does it make? But, you know, she can't have people in society knowing that she has a chef who's from the Midwest, you know, blah, blah, blah. So she insists that he gets fired, and George goes along with her. And I'm telling you right now, George has done a lot of going along with her, but this is going to end soon. I mean, he screamed on her a couple episodes ago, but he still keeps giving into her. But, you know, he obliges. They hire a new chef, which doesn't work out.
Well, I'm sorry, George, but we cannot have a chef from Kansas. We'd be a laughingstock.
But if the food's the same.
You don't know the women of New York. They're all looking for something about us to ridicule. And when they hear that we were taken in, we'd be providing it on a plate. Literally.
But the funniest is his switch between this French accent and this country accent. And when he's talking to the rest of the staff, letting them know what happened, he switches mid-sentence, and it is hilarious.
If you're not Monsieur Baudin, why are you still talking like him?
Because this is who I have been for years. And now it's hard to break the habit.
If your name is Josh Borden and you come from Wichita, I think you've got to try.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
And it's even hilarious when he comes back at the end at the ball because the other chef turned out to be a total flake and he saves the day. But when he's talking directly to Bertha and she hears his accent for the first time, her expression was everything. Oh, I can't take this show. This shit is too funny for me.
Thank you, Monsieur Beau. Thank you, Borden, for stepping in at the last minute and saving the show.
I was glad to do it.
Now let's round this out with Bertha Russell. In many ways, her storyline has been the epicenter of this season, of possibly the series. And this whole season was building up to this kind of this battle royale between her and Lena Astor. And we see it come to a head in this episode. Last week, we know she was ashamed because she was ushered out of the house because Miss Astor still wasn't receiving her. But we also know that Gladys and Carrie Astor have become friendly. They have been rehearsing this quadrille or something, this dance that they're going to do for Gladys's coming out for her debut. And, you know, Mrs. Russell, I think, knew because Mrs. Astor was not receiving her, she would not receive her, that there was a possibility that Carrie was either not going to be able to come to the ball or she was going to have to make a decision that Carrie would not be invited to the ball. And it looks like it was the latter. So she makes an attempt. She gets in her carriage and she goes to Mrs. Astor's house, and Miss Astor will not receive her. Her butler, Mr. Hefty, love that name, he tells her several times that she's not there. And while he's telling this to Bertha, she sees somebody else coming in to see her. So again, it's another snub. It's like, this is just shot after shot after shot. And not to say that Bertha doesn't deserve it, because like I've said many times, she's one of those characters. She's very polarizing. I think there's a lot of people who love her and respect her ambition and see her as the victim in this, and there are a lot of people who hate her and can't stand the way that she moves. And I vacillate between the two. But Mrs. Astor is not checking for her, and this is kind of the final straw. So she goes and she tells Gladys, like, listen, you need to go and call Carrie and tell her that she can't come to the party, she can't perform because her mother has not received her. So this is just straight manipulation. Bertha is smart enough to see how this is going to play out, to know that the daughters are going to put the pressure on their parents. It will work for Carrie, but it won't work for Bertha and Gladys, because it's been shown several times that no matter what Gladys says, how much she pushes and prods, Bertha's going to do what Bertha wants to do, regardless of how it makes her daughter feel. But on the flip side, we see that Lena Astor is concerned about her daughter's feelings. We see scenes in which her daughter is upset with her because she has been disinvited. She tells her mother's like, in the beginning is like, listen, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not messing with that lady. I'm not going to that party. It is what it is. But over time, she sees that her daughter is upset. Her daughter is snubbing her. Her daughter is not speaking to her. She's not coming down for dinner. She's not going to events with her. And in the beginning, I think that Mrs. Astor is taking it on the chin, assuming this is just a teenager or a young adult stubbornness or reaction. But over time, it starts to bother her. And later on we learn, and she mentions to her daughter, my husband is away a lot. What would I do without you? So she is influenced by her daughter. She does want to see her daughter happy. And so, she decides to put on her big girl panties and she goes to see Bertha.
Won't you consider letting Carrie be included in the fun after all?
Would you come with her?
It is such a difficult time of year for me.
If you wish for me to bring your very charming daughter back into the fold, then you must accompany her. I want you to ensure that my neighbors, Mrs. van Rhijn and her sister, will attend.
Why bother with them?
I'm tired of being cut on my own doorstep.
This conversation does not go as she intended. In her head, she thought, if I just show my face and say, hey, listen, okay, fine. I know you came by. I'm sorry, I was receiving somebody else. I'm here now. Let my daughter go to this party. Like, can we just resolve this right now? But Bertha, she is... she's got resentment just stacked up, from the beginning of the season, from last week, the incident that Mrs. Astor doesn't even know about when she was ushered out of her house. And she sees where she has the power in the situation. She's holding the chips and she is going to use them to her advantage. And she tells her point blank, sure, I will forgive that and I will re-invite your daughter, but you need to come with her. And Mrs. Astor's like, I would, but I have something else going on. And, they can all see, it's like one of those things where everybody sees what everybody's doing, right? She knows, Bertha knows that Mrs. Astor has no place else to be. Mrs. Astor knows that, she's just doing what she needs to do to make her daughter happy. She knows that Bertha knows that, but they are playing this mental game of chess, right? And she's like, look, I'm here now, right? I've come to you. Can you just let my daughter go? And Bertha insists that no, I will not unless you attend. And not only do I need you to attend, but I also need you to tell your people to attend, specifically the Van Rhijns across the street, because I am tired of being disrespected in my neighborhood, like, right across the street from my house. And Mrs. Astor walks away saying, okay, well, I see where we are right now. She later has a conversation with Ward McAllister, and he tells her, it's time to kind of let her in. I don't know to what extent he knows that he has been entertaining Mrs. Russell. I imagine she probably does, because she probably has eyes and ears everywhere. But he tells her, listen, if we do not let these new money folks come in, they're going to create their own society and then they're going to boot us out. Makes sense. It's logical. And that's probably why he has befriended Mrs. Russell, because he does see the writing on the wall. And he tells um, Mrs. Astor, like, you're not going to win this. You know, the best thing to do is to kind of just, you know, fold now, and this is all going to work itself out later. So she agrees to attend the ball.
We cannot hope to keep out the new people entirely, or they form their own society that would exclude us.
One thing I did find of interest that I wanted to talk about was there's this one scene where they have this juxtaposition of Bertha letting Gladys know that she can reinvite Carrie, and that, you know, Mrs. Astor has made it right so that Carrie can come to the event. And Gladys is thrilled. She hugs her mother. This is probably one of the few times we've seen affection between the two. And at the same time, we see a scene in which Mrs. Astor tells her daughter Carrie that, you know, she can now go to the ball and that she would also be attending, and we see that Carrie is thrilled.
Only to tell you that Carrie Astor is coming tonight after all.
Send messages now to your friends that I will be there tonight, starting with the parents of the other dancers.
You won't regret it.
I regret it already.
Oh, Mother.
What am I to do? I'm alone since your father's never here. How can I manage without my darling daughter?
So what we're seeing here are two women who have daughters, who love their daughters, and are making concessions. And I'm just, let's put a pin in that, because I don't really mean what I'm saying, but this is for lack of a better words. They're making concessions to make their daughters happy. Well, at least Mrs. Astor is, because she doesn't want any parts of Bertha. She's made that very clear, but she realizes that her daughter is upset. She does not want that, and she is willing to make, in her eyes, one of the largest sacrifices, you know, to eat humble pie and to attend the event, to go to Bertha, right? So it's one thing to even go to this woman's house. The second is to ask a favor of her, to ask her daughter to be allowed, and then to concede that she will do something that she doesn't want to do. And then furthermore, reach out to her friends and convince them to go, and use her power in order to convince them, because that's what she does with Agnes, and that's the only reason that Agnes shows up. So, you know, Mrs. Astor, now granted, I'm not saying she's a good person. You know, some will say she never should have iced her out to begin with, and this is just kind of like what she's getting in return. But she is making a lot of concessions, and she's doing this all for her daughter. It's just really, truly just for her daughter. Because she loves her daughter, she wants to see her daughter happy. She does not like the effect that this has had on her. On the flip side, Bertha receives the love and the affection from Gladys as if she's done something on her behalf. But what Gladys either does not know or does not care in the moment is that none of this has to do with making Gladys happy. We've seen since episode 1, Bertha seems not to care about about Gladys's happiness. You know, it's all about her, what she wants. And we'll see later, because this does seem to be following the storyline of the Vanderbilts versus the Astors, in which she will turn her daughter into a princess bride, a dollar princess, and send her off to Europe, where she will not be happy. So we see that Bertha really doesn't care how Gladys feels. Everything she's doing is for her own purposes. So she receives this gratitude and this affection and love from her daughter for what it seems that she's done, but she's really done nothing other than hold her ground and take a risk in a way. Now, this could have turned out completely different, because if Mrs. Astor had dug her heels into the ground and said, you know, I don't care, I'm not going, and you're not going, Carrie, you know, that eventually would have blown over, because mothers and daughters do have those kind of relationships. But she very well could have done that. And Gladys would have been distraught. She would have been quasi-embarrassed. She would have been hurt. So this just all worked out for Bertha by happenstance, because Mrs. Astor gave in. So as I see this scene, and I don't know if this is the way the writers wanted us to believe, that look, Bertha has a soft side. Look what she did for her daughter. I'm not buying this. None of this was for Gladys. This was for her. She just ended up smelling good and looking good at the end of this because of the way that the chips fell. But she did not go out of her way or make any sacrifices on the behalf of making her daughter happy. I just wanted to point that out. So the episode ends with the ball. Bertha has gotten her way. She's had this huge gala event. Everything is beautiful, and all of her preparation is worth the effort and the money. She gets many of the folks that she wants in the room, namely Mrs. Astor, Mr. Ward McAllister, the Van Rhines, and a bunch of other folks. I mean, we even see a scene in which George threatens or blackmails one of his clients into attending, holding over him that he will not extend a loan to him unless he and his wife show up. So, she gets what she wants, and you can see she's extremely happy. She's had her moment. Her daughter is happy. So all is well. But this is going to set the tone for what I'm thinking is going to be a battle between the two. Mrs. Astor does not like the fact that she was manipulated. She was manipulated to attend, to allow her daughter to attend, and to lay pressure on her friends and her associates in order to attend. So, there's even a scene where they're standing around and they're watching their daughters dance together. And Mrs. Astor says to her, like, what makes you think that I won't take revenge on you? Like, why do you think that you're safe now? And Bertha says, well, we are more alike than we're not. And if you allow me to, I will be one of your best friends. So I don't know how Mrs. Astor will receive that. Number one, her daughter is happy. Her daughter is friendly with Gladys. Number two, Ward McAllister has given her a note of advice and told her that, she should receive her and she should allow her into the fold. She's starting to see that other folks, like Aurora and them, are letting Mrs. Russell in. Agnes is not for it. Agnes is definitely not for it, and she was going to go down fighting and screaming. But a lot of other people, I guess, are kind of letting the guard down, and this was a huge statement by Mrs. Astor. The fact that she was there and that her daughter was participating, it sent a strong message, and I believe that a lot of the doors are now going to be open for Bertha, just as she wanted, even though she manipulated her way into it. But I don't think that Mrs. Astor is going to take this sitting down. I think she's going to resent the fact that she was manipulated and she was backed into a corner. And I think she will seek some type of revenge next season. And I think it only makes sense. I mean, we're only on season 1. It wouldn't make sense if right now, that they just made nice and that they were friendly. I mean, where would we go from there, right? So obviously we need this conflict and this other stuff moving on. So I think that's what we're going to see next season. But this was a win for Bertha. She got exactly what she wanted. So, this is kind of like, Bertha 1, Mrs. Astor 0, and we'll see what happens next season. A couple of honorable mentions this episode was Oscar. He still has his eyes on Gladys, and you see them dancing the waltz at the end. He also had a conversation with his boyfriend, John Adams, in which he said that, he does intend to still pursue Gladys, but nothing is going to change between the two of them. Another thing we saw was that Larry Russell comforting Marian after that whole debacle with Mr. Rhaikes. And like I said last week, I think I see some connection going on between the two of them, and it definitely seems genuine. I like it. I think the two of them would make a really nice couple. So we see that there's some blossoming of that relationship there. And all in all, this was an amazing finale. It really and truly was good. Like I said, it tied up a lot of loose ends. It brought some storylines to conclusion. We didn't have these silly cliffhangers that we have to wait a year to figure out what's happening. I'm glad they put a button on this whole Marian and Tom thing. I'm glad we learned about Peggy and her son and that he is alive and we know what's going to happen next. And I think the one cliffhanger is what's going to happen between Mrs. Astor and Mrs. Russell. Bannister still is going to seek his revenge. We saw him have a little glance over at church. So we see that he's not done there. Mrs. Turner is going to resurface at some point. So she's going to come back and seek her revenge. I do think, though, even though George is giving Bertha her way and he seems to be very much in love with her. And I have to say, I really like them as a couple. They look good together. You can feel the chemistry between the two of them. Another note, Bertha with her hair down over one shoulder, she's gorgeous. Like every time she's in bed and she's got that little side ponytail, that Carrie Coons is a beautiful woman, and Bertha is, I have to say, like, I don't like the way she moves, but she is a gorgeous woman, and when she has that little ponytail, she is serving looks. So we'll see what happens. I mean, this was a fun ride. I'm so glad I started watching because I wasn't sure that I was going to participate. But clearly, you know, this is a fan favorite. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are watching it. And I have heard that they are currently shooting season 2. So as soon as the new season starts, I will reconvene these reviews and we will talk about it week to week like we've been doing. So let me know what you thought in the comments. Talk to me about, you know, all of the things that happened and what do you think is going to happen next season and what your thoughts are about what has happened last night. So again, thank you for taking this journey with me and for, you know, viewing and for tuning in each week and for having all these robust conversations with me and, you know, just delving into the details of it all and exploring the history of it. This has been a really fun ride and I'm glad that I decided to do a review about this show. I didn't know that it would be so popular and that I would find my tribe and so many people to talk to about this show. So again, please do like, share, and subscribe. I am reviewing other shows and I review all kinds of shows. So like the next series I'm probably going to start doing is going to be the House of Dragons, which is the prequel to Game of Thrones. So if you're a Game of Thrones fan, do tune in because I will be watching that week by week. I also watch a little bit of Ratchet TV, so I'm going to be watching Love and Marriage Huntsville, you know, Ready to Love, maybe some Real Housewives, reviews on movies, all that stuff. So please like and subscribe and share and you will get notifications and alerts when my new videos are posted. And thank you again for all of your kind comments and for tuning in every week and for subscribing. I really love it. Thank you and enjoy. Spring is sprung, so enjoy your spring weather wherever you are in the country or the world. And, you know, enjoy yourselves and stay safe and all that good stuff. And we will talk soon. Bye.